Well, hey everybody, it's Sandy and welcome back to my channel dedicated to helping you advocate for your own health one topic at a time. So guys, today I want to share with you how I make my healthy alternative to dark chocolate mousse. So if you want to get in the kitchen with me, please keep watching. Yeah, so we're going to make my dark chocolate avocado. There's the secret ingredient, mousse. It's not going to taste like avocado. It's not going to look like avocado. Please don't worry about it. The avocado kind of turns people off sometimes, but most people really love this mousse, especially if you like a deep, dark, creamy chocolate. The avocado is going to render a really creamy texture to this mousse because it's very high in monounsaturated fat. So normally I would start this video in my kitchen like I usually do when I'm going to make something, but I wanted to have a little sidebar conversation here about glycemic index and glycemic load. The genesis of this is that I personally have a little bit of a sweet tooth, and I've had to learn to find ways to satisfy that sweet tooth while still being true to my principles of my anti-inflammatory eating and overall healthy diet. But when I am going to indulge my sweet tooth, I really try to keep it as healthy as I can. So a while back I did a video on some dark chocolate covered date walnut bars. I'm going to link that video here. I got a lot of good feedback on that video. It has almost no added sugar. Now in the case of this dark chocolate mousse, I am going to be using some sweeteners. Now of course you have any number of options and you can vary this recipe to your liking. I personally use some maple syrup in this recipe. Now I wanted to have a talk about glycemic index and glycemic load. I think most of us have heard about glycemic index by now. It's a numeric value given to various foods, and it was really used to sort of rank sweeteners, but almost any food has a glycemic index, and it really deals with how rapidly it can make your blood sugar rise or how rapidly it's absorbed. And it's basically foods fall along a continuum, whereas sugars have very high glycemic index and fats have a low glycemic index, but it doesn't take into account the amount you would eat, like the number of carbs in a particular serving, and that's really where glycemic load comes in. So you can have a food that has a very high glycemic index while it still has a low glycemic load. So for example, watermelon, it gets kind of a bad rap for being so sweet, and it has a glycemic index of 80. So you'd say, well, that's just all sugar, but it has a glycemic load actually of 5 because, you know, how much watermelon are you going to be able to eat? So it takes into account what you would actually eat in a serving. Grapefruit is another example. So it has a glycemic index of 25, but it only has a glycemic load of 5. So all this is just to say that we are going to be using something today to make the chocolate mousse a little bit sweet. I personally don't like it very sweet. I like dark chocolates, which are less sweet than, say, milk chocolates. So in my case, I'm going to be using maple syrup today. You can substitute that with any sweetener of your choosing. You might also try it with stevia for those of you who are on strict keto or people who want to use an artificial sweetener, and let me know how it goes. I don't personally use the artificial sweeteners. I do use stevia, so I'd be interested in hearing if anybody tries that. But let's go to the kitchen. And we're back in the kitchen. So I'm going to go over the individual ingredients in more detail in just a minute, but I just wanted to show, of course, the feature here in terms of the texture. The body of our mousse is going to be avocados. I'm going to use 2 of them, and you really want them sort of like I showed in my video on guacamole. You really want your avocados to be pretty soft, not something that feels like there's big dents in it where it might be rotting, but you don't want these hard and green. You want it to be nice and soft so that it won't break up into chunks, but it'll rather get all smooth into a nice creamy mousse when you put it in the blender. Now, another key ingredient in this dish is another source of monounsaturated fats and a good source of both potassium and magnesium, just like the avocado, the sesame tahini. So this is just ground up sesame seeds, and I just wanted to point out that I really recommend this brand, which is Simple Truth. Sesame tahini tends to break apart and harden down at the bottom, sort of like some of those natural peanut butters. But unlike the peanut butter, it gets rock hard at the bottom and very difficult to work with at that point. Like I've thrown out more tahini than I've used, I think, because it becomes separated and very hard. I don't tend to see that happen with Simple Truth. It tends to, first of all, stay really well mixed, but when it doesn't, it's pretty easy to mix anyway. All right, so at this point, just go get your blender, and we're going to go over the individual ingredients and put this thing together in about 3 minutes. Okay, so I think I'll insert the recipe right here. Let's just go over some of our ingredients. I've got my 2 avocados, and I've got my 2/3 cup of the sesame tahini that I just talked about. I've got just a little bit of sea salt, a 1/4 teaspoon. Now, you can use plain cocoa powder. I use raw cacao. Cacao, it being unprocessed and raw, has more antioxidants from the cocoa bean. So since we're not going to be cooking this, I prefer to use cacao, but feel free to use regular cocoa powder. Now for my milk, I'm using unsweetened vanilla hemp milk. I find that amongst the non-dairy milks that hemp milk tends to render a very creamy product. Now I've also got my 2 extracts. The coffee is not going to render a coffee flavor at all. Coffee extract brings out the flavor of chocolate. So since this is a nice dark chocolate mousse, I'm going to give that darkness a boost by adding just a tiny bit of coffee extract. Vanilla extract speaks for itself. And finally, my sweetener of choice, which is going to be the maple syrup. So guys, I recently bought one of these shorter pitchers for my Vitamix machine, and I have to say I'm really enjoying using the machine so much better than when I was using that really deep, long, tall pitcher. Now, just like I showed with my guacamole, I'm going to cut the avocados in half lengthwise. They should pull apart really easily. I do have a little brown area in there, so I'm just going to discard that. Remove the pit by hitting it with a knife and just twisting, and it'll come right out. Yeah, I'm a little disappointed that I got a chunk of brown in there. You know, given that that's mostly a color issue and it's not anything to do with the health of the fruit, you probably could use it, but it's such a small area that I'm going to leave it out. All right, so that's the real work. Everything else is easy. I'm just going to toss all my other ingredients right into the blender with that avocado. First comes the tahini. So I'm just going to sort of take an informal survey here. Let me know in the comment section. Am I the only one who couldn't wait for this next season of The Crown? And now I'm devouring it. Here's the sea salt. Hemp milk. Cacao powder. I'm going to do 2 tablespoons of the maple syrup, and I'm going to make them scant tablespoons. You can experiment. When I first started making this recipe, I looked at all different ideas for avocado chocolate mousse, and they were all much sweeter than this. Now, when it comes to vanilla, I really don't measure. I mean, is there any such thing as having too much vanilla extract? And by the way, the purpose of the vanilla extract, particularly in chocolate product, is to bring out the chocolate. Vanilla will bring out the flavor of the chocolate. And then just a tiny bit of my coffee extract. And again, that's just to make that chocolate flavor nice and dark. I've been cleaning up here a little bit as I go. So yeah, I really am addicted to The Crown. I actually love first of all, the wrapping paper, the background, the scenery, and the sets are so gorgeous. And I'm just getting into season 4 where Margaret Thatcher has come into power and Diana has entered the scene. And I think this is the first season where you sort of see a less than rosy picture of the royals and who they are as people. All right, so I've got this on my Vitamix blender. I'm just going to speed through this because it is just so darn loud. But basically, I always start out with a pulse. If you start out with full force with this thing, I find that the chunkier stuff just gets stuck at the bottom. And I find that I get a much creamier blend on any blender if you start out with several pulses, just until the different ingredients get blended together and get a little more uniform before you go full force. So here we go. All right, so let me show you what this looks like. Wow, beautiful. See if you can get a look at that. Nice and creamy and very thick, as you can see. It doesn't run. I can probably get this pretty close to upside down. I don't want to press my luck, but it's very thick and creamy, which is exactly the way I like it. Now comes the part that is not quite so easy, which is getting this from the blender down into the individual serving cups. I have 4 cups here. Just looking at this, having been used to making this, so I think I got a little bit more than I usually do. There's a little bit of variation depending on the size of the avocados, of course, but typically 2 avocados in this particular recipe, it yields 4 servings. So let's see how we do. Hope you can see how creamy that is. Okay guys, so I'm back and I did get exactly 4 servings out of that recipe. So I went ahead and garnished my mousse with some dark chocolate shavings. I want to try to give you a close-up of that. I do recommend that if you're going to put this in the fridge and chill for a while, that you go ahead and cover it with some saran wrap. It won't form a skin like puddings do, but it will dry out. So I would make sure to cover it. Guys, I hope that you'll try this, especially with the holidays coming up. I'm always trying to look for options that provide a nice indulgence and will sate my sweet tooth without the guilt of having overindulged in something really sugary and inflammatory. This especially, given that it has the avocado and the sesame tahini, is loaded with healthy fats, monounsaturated fats, a lot of magnesium, a lot of potassium, and extremely filling. So let me know if you try it. And until next time, be well. Bye-bye.